We are now ready to begin our session, Italian Footprints. Brief introductions of our speakers. Ms. Sitarasti is an Italian-born Odissi and Chow dancer and dance instructor based in Bhubaneswar. She studied Odissi under Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra and started her own school of dance in 1994. Mr. Gianluca Rubogotti is the Consul General of Italy in Kolkata. After studying international law and getting a master's degree in environmental law from the University of Milan, he obtained a PhD in international economic law from the Bocconi University of Milan. They'll be in conversation today with Malavika Banerjee, who's the director of the festival.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome Gianluca in person and Ileana Ji virtually. It's wonderful to have the two of you here. Thank you, Ileana Ji, for doing this from a distance, which must be unusual for you considering the event is in your hometown. So next time we promise to time ourselves better. This discussion actually springs from a two-way conversation. One is about the fact that when we think of Europeans in India, we think of it in a colonial context. And of course, there are the British, then there are the French settlements, the Danish settlements, the few Dutch settlements. But one doesn't speak about the Italian influence on Indians and through the last millennium, let's say, from say the 16th century onwards, or even earlier, as Gianluca might let us know how far back we go. So we wanted to see what are the footprints of Italy in our country over the last few centuries. And the other is about how we perceive Italy today. I think the greatest export of Italy to India would be the pizza and maybe football. So to just show that there was more to this engagement over the centuries and to explore what exactly we've missed in our conversations about Europeans' cultural footprints across India. So I would start with the honorary Odia among the three of us, Ileana. So Ileana Ji, should I call you Ileana or Ileana Ji? Okay, Ileana. We know about your contribution to the Odissi dance structure in Bhubaneswar. What was your first entry into India? And can you talk us through how you felt? What were your immediate reactions and how Bhubaneswar slowly became your home? Your mic is off, I think.
Hello to everybody. I'm sitting here in Jaipur. If you ask me about that, we have to go back a little too much because my actual settlement, it was not even in Bhubaneswar, it was in Cuttack, but it was the third trip. So talking about the first trip, actually, we go back to the 1974. And that was really not related to dance. It was a life trip for a life experience, how many other youth of that generation were doing. India was a target, it was a really experience of life. And it was the trip which we could still do because the borders were open and we could still come by land, by road, crossing the Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and reach India by road. So I'm audible, yeah. And so that was the first experience, which of course had the magic of that type of trip when you live day by day and you don't plan anything and you want to challenge yourself, you want to come out of your comfort zone and and inspired by all the books and authors like Jack Kerouac and Hermann Hesse. And so those were the pilgrimage to the East and the Siddhartha book. So those were the literature which were accompanying us. And also all the movement which against the bourgeois and that kind of establishment which was wanted to impose on us certain rules, and we wanted to break those. So that was the background from where I started, and I landed in India, and it was a very sort of liberatory type of trip. All my fear went away along the way, along the road, and so I got myself enriched. And so that time, India was actually, I target a very ambitious project to face and to afford. And so the second time, it was in '78, and that time it was a different trip because I had already done experience in theater, and especially from the conventional theater, I had gone to experimental theater, physical theater, and I had seen one Kathakali performance in my own town in Bergamo. So that inspired me because I was searching for an expression, physical expression through my body. And I realized that whatever this guru, Krishna Nambudiri, said and demonstrated, I realized that that particular style, of course, the Kathakali had this grammar, very developed grammar of the body. So it was very, for me, it was very exciting. And immediately I asked him how I could reach Kerala and learn some of this grammar. So that was in '78. And so that time I came not by land, by flight. And it was straight to Kerala and intensive workshop of Kathakali. At the end of these 3 months, the same guru talked about Odissi, told me about Odissi. I never knew why. Later on, I came to know that he liked that style. But at that point, he could have told me anything else. I mean, I was totally, I didn't know anything else about the Indian dance. I had done some, of course, examination in my university about Eastern philosophy, Chinese ancient philosophy, Japanese Zen, and also Indian mythology. But Indian dance, I knew only Kathakali, and he told me about Odissi. So when I came back in '79, this time with this name of Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra written in a piece of paper. And I thought that I would, since in the meantime, I had experimented a little bit with this movement, which I had learned in Kerala. And so I thought that if I wanted to utilize this movement for my theater work, I needed to learn a little more. So I thought, okay, let me stay 6 months in Orissa and 6 months in Kerala and go back within 1 year. So this time I came directly to this guru whom I didn't know. I couldn't even pronounce the name properly because it was a big name, a long name. And so I just went straight to him. And what it was supposed to be 6 months, it became 6 years. I never went back to Italy from '79 to '85. And everything disappeared. Kerala, theater, Italy, and only that particular road, which was bringing me from my small room where I was staying as a paying guest in Cuttack to Guruji remain. And that was, became the center of my life. And so from there, everything started.
Okay, fair enough. So it's amazing you're talking about how you came and you decided to settle in India, because just before this conversation started, Gianluca showed me, could you just show me the document that you have found? It's
yes,
an old,
since we are in a literary festival, I thought I should contribute with a book. This is an original print of 1907, which I found in a small, cozy antique bookshop in northern Italy. And it's called Gli Italiani residenti nelle Indie Inglesi. It's about Italians living in the English Indies. And it's been written by this scholar priest called Giuseppe Capra. He came to India at the beginning of the 20th century, and he decided to simply go around, meet with the Italians, because he thought that it could be useful for them to see an Italian face and to have some news about their homeland, because you have to consider we are at the beginning of the 20th century. So it was not so easy to keep contact and to keep in touch with the people you would have left home. So he visited and he met with roughly 350 Italians at that time in different parts of the country. And he divided more or less the presence of Italians in India at that time in two big categories plus one. The categories being the miners, the gold miners, especially in Maharashtra, Karnataka. The second group, he calls them professionals, and it's a big group because it comprises bakers, coffee or restaurant owners. A category which intrigues me, which is hairstylers, either self-employed or employed with other. So I launched my first appeal here. If any of your grandmother or grandfather have some sort of documented testimony of being treated in his or
Having
her
a haircut from an
yes,
Italian. Okay.
in the 20th century.
I have to tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt, that in Bengal, I don't know whether it's the same thing here, there's a system of having roadside haircuts. So the word in Bengali for brick is eat. So an Italian haircut is when you sit on 4 bricks on the roadside and have your haircut, because you're sitting on eat, so it becomes Italian. So maybe we have some clues as to how that came about. Maybe there were some Italian hairdressers in Bengal and Odisha back in the day.
Possible. I mean, the documented trip is not, of course, complete. He just selected a few areas in which he found more Italians. But he took a train from Chennai up to Kolkata, so he passed also through this part of the subcontinent. He didn't mention any specific group of Italians settling in Odisha or in this part, but probably there would be some people from the third category, which is the so-called big category of missionaries.
We'll come back to that after I just throw this question back. So we've reached 1985 in your tryst with Odisha and indeed India. Where would you, what was India like when you saw it in the late 70s and early 80s, Kerala, Odisha? So if you could just briefly tell us, you know, how, as somebody coming in from Italy, you felt, you know, about this journey. Your mic is off.
For me, it was like going back to my village, grandmother village. So it was like a second childhood. So all the dimension, I'm talking about Cuttack, which is another different experience from even Bhubaneswar. Although it's only 25 kilometers from here, but even now people who would come, they would feel the difference, although so many things have changed in both the places. But Cuttack, where I was staying, that dimension, simplicity of life, and that openness. There was no division between inside the house and outside the house. There was no door closed. Actually, even the hospitality, incredible hospitality, incredible. I can't even informal, without formalities. I can't even talk about hospitality because hospitality is too much serious word. There, it was just a lot of affection and love which I got, and the fact that all the houses were open for me, and although I was alone, I never felt alone for a moment. So it was a very unique experience at that point, and I call it as a second childhood. In fact, in my autobiography, which is called My Journey: A Tale of Two Birds, that is second birth for me. Not only because I had to learn all over again how to speak, how to walk, how to, I mean, a gesture, and everything was new to me. It was like a second training in life. Although at that time I was already a doctor in philosophy, but that didn't mean anything. And also the lack of, there was nobody questioning me or just full acceptance. And so nobody even doubted anything or asked me anything, but it was just the openness which I found it. So this is a very unique experience, which I'm sure many other parts of India I would have found, especially maybe in the smaller center, not in maybe in the big metropolis like Bombay or Delhi, but Cuttack is for me has always been a unique place. And so that is what, and as far as of course, the focus was Guruji, and I was very lucky to found the right Guru. There are many outsiders who come and they have to spend and waste a little bit of time to search for the right Guru, for the right master. So I was lucky that I went straight to the person whom I didn't have to change or to search for anything else. It has not always been easy with him. I mean, it's after all, it was a two different culture, and many times I had to readjust my interpretation, and if it was emotionally hard, I had to shift to a more intellectual and critical analysis and understand why I had this reaction from their part, maybe because I was representing something, some colonial things which they had experienced in their history, but it was not against me. Certain places where I could not go, certain things which I couldn't do in the house, certain spaces which are not where I were not, I was not possible to enter. But in that case, then my studies and anthropological and analytical background in my studies helped. And so I could dissociate a little bit from being an emotional reaction to a more analytical reaction. But otherwise, in general, it was an experience which I still love to go back to, and especially those 11 years which I spent in Cuttack before shifting to Bhubaneswar, when already things were a little bit ahead, and I became more professional and dancer, performing artist, and all these things.
So it was not a very hard landing. It was a soft landing, at least in hindsight. So before Ileana spoke, you were talking about the missionaries and some very curious stories about how they use interesting ploys to get Indians to convert. So if you could tell us about a certain Italian Brahmin and others who came around the same time as him.
Yes, there was this famous Italian Jesuit called Roberto De Nobili. He has been also the object of a short story by Anu Pillai. And he is important more from a historical point of view, because nowadays the Catholic Church has stopped considering mass conversion as one of their objectives. But at that time, it was not like this, and there were different ways of trying to convert people. We had normally the idea that the Christian message would be more appealing for the lower strata of society, the poorest, the outcasts. And this guy who came from a noble family, he wanted to cater to the upper classes of India. We are talking about southern India, Tamil Nadu in particular, and the Brahmins. So he introduced this new concept of accommodation, which means trying to accommodate into the new religion and new culture elements of the previous one. Apparently, maybe it doesn't look like a big deal, but it was, because it brought about the intervention of 3 different popes to sort out what's called and known as the Malabar Rites controversy, which was in parallel with something similar happening in China, the Chinese rites controversy. That is, to what extent can somebody who converts to Christianity continue following some rites and some aspects of the previous religions, in this particular case, Hinduism. And there was this Jesuit approach, and on the other hand, there was the approach which was followed by the Archbishop in Goa, or the Salesians, or other parts of the Catholic Church at that time.
Very interesting. That's an amazing, delightful story that Manu Pillai has put in his collection of essays, actually, of interesting journeys through India. Speaking of interesting journeys through India, Ileana, do you think during the 80s, we had the festivals of India, there was a desire to engage France, Italy, there was one in the US, there was one in Russia, then USSR, to have these festivals and an interface between cultures of two countries. Do you think enough is being done between your country, I mean, Italy and India, between your two countries, by way of cultural collaboration? And what do you think could be done? Where would you like to see some improvements?
Well, in fact, you touched actually one point in which I always felt a little bad, because the Festival of India during those years has been done in many places in Europe also. And in Italy has been tried several times, and we never reached to conclude. So because some problem from that side, some problem from this side, I was also part a little bit of the process, some planning and all these things which got interrupted, and so quite a few times it's been, so that has been something unfulfilled. And I think we can always still try to do it. There is nothing which it has been lost now that hopefully we can start to move ahead again after the Corona and COVID and all the lockdown. And that is for sure something which we could do more. There are the fact that there is no, probably in Italy, an Indian Cultural Center. There is only embassy, which has to function for both the aspect, the administrative visa aspect and the cultural aspect. Maybe like we have the Alliance Francaise, we have the Max Muller, we have all this. So in Italy, the Indian Cultural Center is not there. So maybe that could be something which could enrich this cultural exchange. We have only this Indian Tourist Office in Milano, which a little bit function as sometimes as a cultural center also. But big initiative. Whenever my ambition, as far as I could do as an individual, from 85 onward, when I started to go back, it was to present this dance in a prestigious dance festival. I didn't want to be relegated in Mela. Sometimes were happening, which was all a mix-up of things with the elephant and snake and food and yoga and curry and all these things, which was most of the time the concept. I wanted to be presented as a dignified festival, where the previous day maybe there would be classical ballet, and in summer dance festival, which are still organized in very beautiful places, in touristic places in Italy, and I could do some very prestigious festival presenting this dance with my troupe for the first time. And that was my ambition. And it was not easy at all, because it was all in effort, individual effort.
I think she's, there's a...
By me and my mother who improvised. She was improvising herself and contacting the festivals and behaving like an agent, which she was not actually. But we really succeeded in presenting in a very prestigious festival. And that lasted for about 10 years. Then it became a little more difficult. Now there are more Italian dancers, who are actually specialized in the different classical dance style, who are in Italy. And So I suppose that the scenery is a little more vibrant in that aspect, another aspect. But at that time in the 80s, 90s, when I was going there, it was difficult to make the organizer know what it was. They had a strange idea of the Indian dance, and that would be too much, maybe slow or meditative or something. So once they saw the dance and when we succeeded in presenting, then there was a lot of excitement. But it was difficult then to find a professional agent which would carry it forward, because agent, they want to have a number of a number of programs, so that the percentages, I mean, it's worth to work for it. So every time we were again on our individually effort. So this support was not very much there, but so I think, yeah, a lot of things could be improved. This is, I'm talking about Indian project in Italy, maybe Italy in India, maybe
Yes.
consul or ambassadors are more.
Absolutely. So I was just going to throw it back to you, Gianluca. But before that, since we are in Odisha, everyone here must have heard of Gopalpur on Sea. And very briefly, can you tell us about the Italian connection to that before I ask you about the cultural exchanges?
Yes, there is an Italian connection. We are talking about the first tale of the state and possibly the first seaside resort of the whole of India. We are talking about the Palm Beach Resort in Gopalpur on Sea. From the little evidence we have, it was designed by an Italian architect, one Mr. Maglioni. Maglioni means jumper, sweater in Italian. Apparently, he came from Sicily, but there's not much more that we know about it. So this is the second appeal I launch. If anybody of you, of your circles can help us find more documents, we will be very happy, because, you know, the questions that we should ask ourselves are, how come did he arrive here? If he was a professional architect, was this the only project he was involved, or would have he involved in some other constructions, projects, buildings? How long did he stay here for? He sold the property to the Oberois, and then probably after that he went back to Italy. But like with other interesting figures of Italian who stayed in India in the last 2-3 centuries, unfortunately, there is a lack of documents. So it's difficult to really create the whole story about these people. But at least we have some, you know, some visual remembrance of what they did here.
Is there any plaque? Is there any thing at the site that speaks about him?
Well, there is. I'm going to visit the site in the coming days. There are some tags remembering his figure. We are conducting a research together with an Italian scholar on different Italians who were active in India at the last phase of the British Raj. And hopefully we will be able to put everything together. But as I told you, since there is not much documentary evidence, the work can only progress slowly.
Okay. Now, taking off from what Ileana mentioned, and I had also said we'd have to discuss this. What are the plans for a cultural interaction? Are there festivals? I know the pandemic has really been hard to get around, and planning has become a bit of an adventure sport. But are there plans in place for discovering the history of this interface between the two countries, and also to celebrate a cultural exchange right now?
You know, if we want to address from a theoretical point of view, foreign missions present in another country, they can simply, the aim is to promote your own culture. So my objective is to bring more Italy in this part of the world. There are basically two ways you can do it. You can simply think of some expression of Italian culture and bring it here, Or you can, as I've been trying to do in this past year and a half, in spite of the pandemic, to create some sort of common projects. If you allow me to say, both Italy and India are cultural superpowers, in the sense that we have a lot to offer. In the past, we have created the highest form of human expressions and creativity. So I think it's more interesting also for Indian people to try to connect, to bridge together different aspects of Indian culture and Italian culture, or to give a sort of Indian twist to some Italian, purely Italian expressions of culture. For instance, we have worked also with Iliana on a multidisciplinary event. It's a program united by the idea of water and rivers, which are very important both in Italian and in Indian culture. And we have tried to put together Odissi dances. We have tried to blend it with video and photographs by an Italian photographer, music, Indian music composed by a group of Indian musicians, and poetry with a poem in Sanskrit and one in Italian. So the idea is to always try to not simply bring some sort of cultural product, if you want, that can be seen as something out of context, but to try to link it together and to stitch it with something coming out of the soil, given these premises that both countries have got a lot to offer in terms of different artistic expressions.
Wonderful. So coming back to you, Iliana, again, I'm going to walk you back into the 80s and 90s. There were a lot of dancers who came from, you came from Italy. There was Sharon Lowen, who came from the United States. Is that process of young artists wanting to learn Indian classical dance and music, is it still a vibrant one? I was told of some South Koreans who also are in Odisha. I don't know whether that's something you know about, but is it still, is there a steady procession of young artists who want to discover Indian classical music and dance?
Well, I would correct you. At that time, we were few. Now there are many. There are a lot. Yeah. So at that time, you could make the names because we were few, and there were some from Pondicherry and from South India, some French people who became professionals. They are continuing even now in France. So that time, you could really count on the finger. That's why we could probably be distinguished. But the process of this type of, now they have become so many. Of course, people who are settling down like me or Sharon, they're not so many, but people who keep on going and coming, and also the guru from here, they go much more to America or to Europe to teach. So these exchanges increase a lot. So there are from Japan a lot. Japan is, there is one from South Korea, as you said, in Odisha, but then there is really a lot of them. I mean, and they have also more access also to the festival here, because it has become a prestigious things to have to present a foreigner. I should say that at my time, it was not so easy for us, for the few of us, to enter into the big festival in India because of our foreign origin. So it has been a struggle. It's been a fight to be accepted in Khajuraho, for example, those big festivals, and even ICCR to break the policy of ICCR to be recognized by Indian Council for Cultural Relations as any other, for your capacity, for your talent, and not for your birthplace, and not to be excluded because you are not born in India. And slowly that policy has changed, and I have to get the credit myself to have started that process in which for the first time a non-Indian has been totally sponsored by CCR and supported as any other Indian-born dancer. So we, the pioneers, had to actually break many rules and many rules means to go to and change to try to change
basically a mindset, actually.
Mindset, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, but now it's easier for the people who are now of foreign origin. Easier, relatively easier, I should say. Maybe some of them could also bring their experiences, which I'm sure they may have still some difficulties. But yeah, the number, and one thing is there that those names which we could come up also because the gurus, those charismatic and gurus were still alive. So we were lucky to have this our training in a very, I mean, in a very deep way and in a very so that's why probably we at that point we stay over and we could really become what we are becoming. We have become now. The people who come at this point, of course, they have the guidance of the second generation or the third generation of gurus, which are actually also good. But I mean, those like the great names which of gurus of niche style, which we got to after the luck to have at that time, they are no more. So this is why probably you are have the impression that those time are not reproducing.
You always remember the pioneers, yes. We will now move a bit out of Odisha, but still staying in the east. To my shame, I didn't know Firpo's was Italian, and so can you talk us through the part you mentioned? Even in this book, there were a lot of restaurateurs and people associated with food back 15 years ago. So the footprints across Calcutta, because a lot of the audience are very familiar with Calcutta as well, or Kolkata as we know it now.
Yes, I will not just limit myself to Kolkata, but if we want to take stock this division ideated by Professor Capra in his book of more than 100 years ago, we can think of the missionaries, of course, and we have an interesting example in Padre Giuseppe Maria Bernini, who was a Capuchin, and he lived for 2 years in Patna, so we are still more or less in this area of India, and he wrote a dictionary, Hindi, Latin, Italian. So these are figures that if we really want to classify, probably it's not fair to confine them only their role as missionaries, because they are missionaries and thank you, missionaries and scholars at the same time. If we think of the arts, we cannot ignore the figure of Olinto Ghilardi, who was one of the teachers of Abanindranath Tagore, and therefore, if you want to put it in perspective, he's one of those who got this new Indian artistic style kicking off in Kolkata, and he was for 20 years the vice principal of the Government College of Art in Kolkata. Then, as you said, there is the business part, which relates more on the food, restaurants. If you go to Kolkata today, you would still find a plaque. It's a bit damaged, but it is still there in front of Governor's House, dedicated to Federico Peliti. Federico Peliti is another very interesting character because he was a sculptor. He graduated from the Fine Art Academy of Turin under Vela, who was one of the most famous sculptors of Italy at that time. And then he also started photography. And he introduced these new ways of photographing also to Kolkata. But he was also a chef, particularly a baker. So when Lord Mayo was sent as the Viceroy of England here in India, he wanted to have a baker with him. He made a public competition, and this guy from Turin won. As you know, Lord Mayo was assassinated 2 years after his arrival into India. And so this guy from Italy found himself a few thousand kilometers away from home, alone, without the employer. So what did he decide to do? To set up his own business. So he opened up 2 restaurants, one in Shimla, which is featured in one of Rudyard Kipling's short stories, and the other one in Kolkata, which became immediately the epitome and the center of fine dining, of a new way of enjoying food. And he also did the home catering and home deliveries, and I'm sure he catered also to some of the elite of Odisha at that time, because he would put everything from the cutlery, the crockery, the pottery, the ingredients, the servants on a train, and he would come to your place and set up the dinner for all of your guests.
So before I let both of you go, what about being Indian now in 2022? You've been here now for 40 odd years. What gives you hope as far as the classical arts? And I'm speaking to you now as somebody who is an Indian classical art exponent and stalwart. So what gives you hope?
Well, the number of people who are approaching this art is increased a lot, even among the Indians and all this thing. And there are more opportunity also to do a career through the dance, which was maybe less in the past. And many of the girls who are learning with me, Indian girl, Oriya girl, in the 80s and 90s, after marriage, they stopped. They didn't continue. Now that tendency and that is a little less, even in Orissa. And there is opportunity to work and to earn some money also by teaching abroad. There are quite a few gurus and dancers who keep on regularly going. They have their own students who are organizing in America, in Europe. So they've been called there. So it is an opportunity to, as a career, which was not there before. Maybe I would like, as usually when the number increase, maybe sometime also the quality is not matching with the quantity, with the number of people who approach, and not everybody maybe have the capacity and to understand and to do deeply into the form and to appreciate it and to study, to research, to have a total a total approach, not only the superficial one. So that I hope that, and I would like to say that in the present educational system, which unfortunately or fortunately is not very much giving enough importance, according to me, to the heritage, to the past, to the roots of Indian culture, and it is more oriented by necessity and by towards maybe more scientific, technologically orientation, but the Indian dance training, classical dance training, is maybe one avenue which is still open for the people who are approaching to learn about the things which maybe they are not focused in their own normal education in the college and school. So many things. So one should, I would like that the family of the people who are sending their daughters to learn this would give more space and more importance. It should not remain just a side
Shouldn't be a hobby.
which when you don't have anything to do, okay, you go and learn dance, but give them the real importance, because it's really a door which can open so many the aspect of the Indian culture, which according to me is the most precious to be preserved. And so unfortunately sometimes nowadays it's not the case for everybody.
And that's a beautiful message about from you, about you've engaged with Indian culture for so long. And yes, these are times where we have to also be a little cautious about losing too much in our quest to innovate. Gianluca, so what are the plans you have to present Italy to different parts of, at least this part of India? The stories you've been telling us, are there any ways you would like to consolidate it into an exhibition or a seminar?
Well, talking about this short mission I'm doing now in Odisha, for instance, we will have in a couple of days a seminar with the students of the universities here, because I have noticed that numbers are not so big, but the students who come from Odisha are good students normally, and I would be happy if more and more could start considering Italy as a destination for their postgraduate studies, because a lot of people think that in order to study in Italy, you need to know the language, but that's not the case. English is more than enough, because most of the universities in Italy now offer courses in English. And I think that personal exchanges, that means people going to a country, coming back, experiencing firsthand, are probably the best way to create these bridges between two cultures and two peoples.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful note to end this on. Gianluca is going to be here for some more time in case you have any questions. Ileana, thank you so much. Next time, we want you to be at home when this festival comes visiting Bhubaneswar. It's always a pleasure to have you at this festival. Hope you enjoy Jaipur. Stay well. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Namaskar to everybody.
Namaskar. Thank you, Gianluca.